Like any tabletop role-playing game, how you play Lancer is up to your group and more directly up to the game master in terms of design and flavor. But in this video, I'll give you a little walkthrough of my own personal experiences with Lancer, other games that I've seen played and have played that are similar, and things you can do in your own Lancer game to prepare for session, both as a player and as the game master. My first experience with a mecha-based tabletop RPG game was a podcast from a group called Friends at the Table. They're on Spotify. Played a very awesome game of Beam Saber. A huge emphasis on roleplay and personalizations for the mechs, where a huge bonus of playing this game was the ability to describe events, effects, and actions with details and roleplay to have the game master decide a bonus that follows through with the roles that are required. I found myself listening and envious of a system that rewarded players for really diving headfirst into the roleplay aspect of the game, both inside and outside of combat, where you could metagame with bonuses on the table, but the real strength of the game lies in the creative and free-flow state of the game that it always stays in. There were amazing scenes that are painted with wonderful words and powerful roleplay from casually just good friends. I highly recommend watching their episodes of The Road to Partisan. Again, they are Friends at the Table on Spotify. Very good group. Very funny, too. After I had gotten hooked and described the series to a friend of mine, he introduced me to Lancer, a tabletop game with a heavy roleplay focus and a nice system in which you could customize the loadout of your mech like you would a Gundam frame. My first friend group was 3 friends and our GM, who ran us through our first sessions of Lancer. At first, I will admit, Lancer does have a bit of a shift from the traditional D&D experience. Many foreign terms and skills made for a bit of a learning curve, but by the second session, we were all having a blast and really enjoying our time in-game. Playing inside the mech always felt good. You had so many options to pick from when designing your mech that even if 2 people picked the same frame, it always felt like a different mech. But the game starts all the players off with an identical mech called the GMS Everest. So learning the basics was actually a lot easier for both the players and the GM to walk everybody through what was needed. To all those looking to run a game of Lancer, I'll be discussing the things you can use to help yourself design encounters and roleplay in later segments. Once you get your feet wet, it's time to jump headfirst into the best part of Lancer, which comes from the openness of the worlds. You have as much or as little of the world to play in as you want, both as a GM and as players. You have multiple galaxies worth of canon lore to look into, and everything else in between to explore. Multiple systems of planets with problems and mechs, hundreds of groups and villains to meet, talk to, and fight. This makes it dizzying to think about when you take a step back and just start looking at it. But that's the beauty of it all. You can sit on one planet and never leave if you don't want to. There's so much to do in every place from a creative standpoint. It allows all the people at the table to easily start narrowing down what they really want to do every session. Do you want to go start a regime and fight against the man? Do you want to go out and shop every episode and get new pieces for your mech? Do you want to fight every single thing that you encounter? What about aliens? Are aliens in your game? Are giant mechs in your game that are colossal in size, planet-sized mechs? Whatever you design as a game master is open for interpretation to the players and yourself because the game is so open-ended. This is one of the main reasons why I recommend Lancer to practically everyone, because Lancer allows you to be flexible in your creativity with the game, but also establishes that there is a firm rule for a lot of interactions that you need to run the game. What I recommend is that players and GMs alike start to understand what kind of game you're looking for as quickly as possible. What all of you want to do at the table. Don't waste your time trying to do things that nobody wants to do. Experiment, try things out, test the lines of which you find your reality lying upon. What things you've never tried before, and things that might be fun for everyone to experience. The game is about interpretation, it is about interest. And if you aren't willing to explore, then you're losing out on a lot of the things that make Lancer so good. Now, for me and my friends personally, we found that fighting inside the mechs was the best part of every single game we played. Reading the effects and stressing over my movement, my health, and my heat, they're the bread and butter of what I find this game to be interesting in. But every other session, we took time out of the day to be the pilots, to walk around on the planet on foot, to meet people behind the mechs, to understand who was running the cities and shops, meeting allies and rivals alike, to make the game feel so much more like an episode straight from Gundam. This is just the way my group played, but feel free that if you want to fight more, less, or even not at all, there are many, many options in the game to support it. In fact, there are only two real parts of Lancer that I see. There is the pilot, and there is the mech. And if you needed to, you can leave one without ruining the game. But I would personally say at least try it. At least give it a good shot, and leave the other if needed. In this next part, I'm going to be talking to mostly the GMs, but players, if you're still around during this, you can pay attention and pick up a couple things. This might help your GM if you want to talk to them about world building. Setting up the game can be interesting, but the hard part of sitting down and deciding who's going to be the GM of Lancer is that it's a lot of work. There are a bunch of things to consider, so I'll take the time now to help you organize yourself and gather the things that you might need for your own game. Now, following this, you might have all or some of these, but I would recommend at least getting a couple of them to get you on your way. Knowing the system is probably the most helpful piece of information you can do to get your game off the ground. It's going to be very helpful to know the rules that are the most important, to organize yourself on what is most important and what is least important. I would recommend going to YouTube and watching a Lancer game in real time being played. Get a real feel for the system and understand what others are doing to enjoy themselves, and find your own way for your group to have fun. The CompCon website has many tools that I won't be able to go over fully in this video, but I will cover them very quickly to the best of my ability. I would also recommend that every GM start their game with a Session 0, a pre-session, before the game actually starts. This way all the players can read about the GMS Everest, the mech they're going to start with. That way you can help them build their characters. That way you can explain where they're starting and why they're starting. You can ask all these questions to your GM, and your GM can answer all these questions, and then during Session 1 you can just get right into it. You can just start the game. Trust me, this helps a lot more than you think. Now, the list on CompCon is pretty long, but the first thing that they have is the weapons, systems, frames, core bonuses, and the license that all pilots need to use their mech. Although it's there, I might recommend that you start by understanding the system as a whole. Like what to look for when you need a certain rule, such as how much damage they're doing. How do you determine a saving throw? All that information is actually on each of the frames themselves, but familiarizing yourself with the layout of the information and not specifically the information itself will save you so much time in the future. Knowing where to find something is more important than knowing what something is. Following that, being able to know every mech is a super unreasonable expectation of yourself. Start small. Know what your players are wanting to play next. Ask them, are they wanting to play a certain type of frame? Just make a small list. Even if that's like 10 mechs that they might be interested in, that's 10 mechs that you don't really have to read into all that much. All you have to know is the basics. This will save you time in the future so you're not reading every single mech and then having to remember which one did which. The list is there on CompCon to help you. Use it as a resource. Use it as a tool. NPCs can be very intimidating to new dungeon masters, and especially to those who have a new system in place with a new type of roleplay. Building a person out of thin air can be, well, hard. But that's the fun of many RPGs, is that every personality trait you can think of is viable, because everyone has their own story. You don't have to make voices or backstories for your NPCs. You have a lot on your plate, GM. Focus on what you can do, and polish up the world when you're ready and when you're comfortable. CompCon has a great system for NPCs, and for the encounters to use for those NPCs. The ability to make the NPCs have licenses, backgrounds, and even character sheets makes forming these non existent people that much easier. Again, CompCon has a system for this. They have information and tools at your disposal to use. Just use them, save your stuff, take it slow. Now, the rules are interesting because as a GM, players are going to be asking you a million questions. And there are guides for the general rules in and out of combat listed in the main compendium for CompCon, including conditions and their effects, action economies and their effects, a glossary of any specific information that you need to find, and lastly, information about the world around you and the main lore of Lancer, such as the manufacturers that supply the frames to pilots. Now, this canon, I say, is the official written canon. But you can always make up something. You can have a brand new group of people that are only sending out mechs to certain individuals. Now, this is ThatTurtleGM. This is me cutting in from the future here during the editing process. I wanted to give my 2 cents over what it really means to be a GM and go a little off script. To me, being a GM is a position of power and responsibility, where I can guide players with my skills through a fantastical world of my own creation. And with them alongside me, they can also paint details that I forgot to do along the way. They design people, places, events, and without them, a GM is really nothing. Without the players at your table, you are just sitting there playing make-believe. I know that without the players, you're really just sitting there by yourself playing make-believe, but with people there who are really enamored with the story, it's almost like you're writing a book in front of everybody, with everybody. It is an amazing responsibility, and I recommend that all players who haven't at least tried to GM at least get the perspective of somebody who's doing it. And to understand that DMs can put a lot of time and effort and love into creating the worlds around them. And more specifically, there is a lot of time and effort that goes into it, and it can be intimidating to new people to know that there are maps and NPCs and character voices, there's session prep, there's organization on what time you're scheduling, where you're meeting. There is a lot on your plate, but it is so well worth the experience to see all these people who are enamored with the work that you've put in and are willing to, for lack of a better term, light it on fire. As weird as it is to say, it's a very strange relationship that the Dungeon Master has with the players. It's sort of a love-hate thing, and don't get me wrong, it is very frustrating at times, but wow, is it amazing. I'll go back onto script here and let you guys get back to the video, but I wanted to do a little openness and show my true thoughts on everything, and I hope you enjoy. Location is interesting because, like I mentioned in a previous video, the worlds you create can have as little or otherwise massive impact on the story of your game. Whether you decide that fighting on an asteroid hurtling through space that's also on fire is what you want, or whether infiltrating an enemy mecha base with defenses and a priority of stealth is what you need to do, then as the GM, you need to decide what is there, for the players to interact with? Is there cover? Is there panels in which they need to hack to open doors? Are they taking damage every turn from radiation or fire? Is gravity low? Is gravity high? Are they on a planet that's too dark to see? Improv helps you a bunch. Being able to be flexible and change whenever the players go off the main path is great. But doing your homework in this instance and working on designing a story and a path for the players to follow helps make the game more believable and makes the experience that much more rewarding. It will organize you. It will keep all of your ideas in a nice little row. Even if they don't ever go to that building that you spent an hour designing, that's fine. You can use it later. They didn't know about it. Whatever you need to do to build your story is up to you. Although CompCon doesn't technically have a map system, nor does it have a system in which to physically play the game, I can list a few places to try out for such a problem. Incarnate is a map-making website that is free and uses the classic hex squares that you need for Lancer. The paid subscription part is interesting. I use it personally, but you can use the system for free, and it's still great. The paid system is cheap. It's a one-time payment over the year, and I love using it personally. Now for location, Roll20 is the best free system, with a learning curve for sure, but for being free, you have access to tokens, maps, a board in which to interact, a system to roll dice with, a place to actually call people and talk to them, and send messages privately. It's pretty much all in one, and it's all I use, really. Lastly, the story. Although the world is your own creation, it is just as important that the players are a part of the world as it is for you to make the world in which they play in. I find that allowing players to explore parts of a game that I never thought of to add, like religion, multiple religions, the toils of war, their perspective on it, other people's perspective on it, the economy. How does that work in a game like this, where it's so big, it's galactic wide? In obscure or otherwise funny topics that would have never come up without their help. Lean into their creativity, lean on them for ideas. Build a world with places and people, but don't overinvest your time into doing it alone. Let the players decide on whether or not they like your characters and then build from there. Only build the things that are the most important and detail later. Do not be afraid to take inspiration from other sources and use them as your own. It may feel weird to say that, oh, well, maybe I'm copying off of, this show because I want this. That is perfectly okay. You can do that. This is the best part of the role-playing aspect. It's your game. You can do what you want with it. As long as you're enjoying yourself, these kind of games are very, very fun. And I would recommend everyone at least try it once to play it. If you're a GM out there and you are like really struggling with like running this game, I can try to help you as much as I can. If you list it on YouTube, or if you hit me up on Twitch or Discord, if you talk to me, I will try my best. I wanna see people play this game. I love this game. This game's amazing, but it will take time to get used to. There is a very high learning curve for people who don't even know what a tabletop game is. But trust me when I say it is worth the learning process. It is worth the headache of learning this game, because there is so much to offer on this game for being so small. I want to thank you all for coming by and listening to this video. This one may have ran a little long, but I had a lot of passion about this one, and somebody asked for this one specifically. So you're welcome. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye. If streaming games, playing D&D, talking about all things nerdy, and even embarrassing myself on live is good enough for you, well, maybe check out my content. And thanks for watching this one. I really appreciate it. If you need to find me, go ahead and look at my links down below, and maybe check out some of my other videos on TikTok and Twitch.